What's up, everybody? Ryan Thomas live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. It is Saturday night, and I'm just getting back from the Buffalo Sabres game. The Buffalo Sabres win 4-2 in one of the more impressive games that I've seen in Sabres history. Jack Eichel scoring all 4 goals. Yes, you heard that right. Jack Eichel scoring all 4 goals for the Buffalo Sabres. And better than that, the Sabres defensively looked a lot better than they have in previous games. The Sabres looked like a team that really, really needed this one. And they did. And they got it. So all is well and good in Buffalo, New York. I feel like over the last few years, since I started this podcast, I wanted to really dive into the Buffalo sports scene, really dive into the Buffalo Bills, the Buffalo Sabres, Buffalo as a city, the Western New York region. And I think I've done that. I think I've accomplished that. I think I've garnered the attention of a lot of really awesome people. And whether they've been guests on the podcast or not, whether I've interacted with them about my podcast or not, I feel like that there are a lot of different layers to this podcast that I just haven't really tapped into yet. And if I can take the platform, if you will, that I have and use it to shed light on a situation or shed light on something that could really make a difference in someone's life, I'm going to do that because I like that. I like the sound of that. I think that that's beneficial, and I think that that's something that honestly will make me feel very fulfilled as far as the journey that is the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. So, obviously, I have been fascinated by sports from a young age. I can remember being 7 years old, having a comforter on my bed as a 7-year-old boy in Lockport, New York, my hometown. And the comforter had all 31 logos, 31 helmets of NFL teams. I remember having, like those border wallpapers that you would have around your room. And there were all of the football helmets. I remember having those little plastic helmets that, you would collect in a gumball machine or whatever. And I got all of them. At one point, I think my dad put like $5 into a gumball machine. And we got like as many as $5 would get you. And even if we got a duplicate team, like if I got an Eagles one and then he got an Eagles one, he put the Eagles one in one room, and I would get the other Eagles one. So that was something that I did. I remember wearing a Peyton Manning jersey to my football banquet when I played Pop Warner, Little Loop, as it's called, or as it was called back when I played. So, just a lot of really great memories in my life have revolved around sports. And I think that sports have always been a little bit of an emotional crutch for me when maybe I was going through some bad times in life, whether it was my grandfather at the time being sick or whether it was, a way for me to continue building a good father-son relationship with my dad. Just the typical motivations for a boy to be enamored with sports was why I was. And I think the best thing a young boy or a young girl, I think the best thing that they could do to this very day is to get involved in some sort of sport or some sort of club or anything that would get their attention, anything that would immerse their motivation into that sport or club or group. And I come to you guys and say these things because I can actually relate to that. When I went from middle school to high school, I was not someone that you would say was a focused student. I didn't like school. I didn't like my teachers. As a matter of fact, I hated school. I hated the classes. I hated waking up early to get to school. I didn't like my teachers. My teachers didn't like me. And maybe they thought I was a good kid. Maybe they thought I had more potential as a student. But I really didn't care. I didn't care what their opinions were. I didn't care what those teachers thought of me. I didn't care about any of that. I only cared about doing good enough in school and what girl did I have a crush on that school year. Honest, it's very funny. It is. It's very funny. But those are the only two things that I really cared about were sports and what girl do I have a crush on that I thought might have a crush on me. That was really it. And those that know me, from middle school and high school, they would agree. And those are things that, kids I think in high school think of today. It's not abnormal. It wasn't, out of the ordinary or anything like that. But just looking back on that, knowing who I am now and knowing where I'm at in life now, I chuckle about that. But that's the thing, knowing where you're at in life now and comparing yourself to, what you were like when you were 16, 17, you're a completely different person in a 10-year span. Two completely different walks of life, two completely different maturity levels, mindsets, you name it. But along the way, you have people that help you get to that maturity level, that help you get to that mindset. And I've had a group of people in my life that were all considered Coach A, Coach B, or Coach C, Coach D. I've had X amount of coaches that I really enjoyed learning from, that taught me facets of life. Two of which were my grandfather and my father. And to have coaches that taught you the facets of baseball, that taught you the facets of football from an early age, and your grandfather and your father, that's pretty normal. I think there's a lot of young boys and young girls that could say that their grandfather or father taught them something about the sport that they tried to play. That's pretty normal, I think. But there's one man out there that really I've never brought him up in a podcast before. I've never mentioned him in a podcast before. I've never told the story before. And I feel like it's a story that I have to tell. Now that I have the platform that I have, morally, I feel like this is a story that I got to tell. So I'm pretty sure he is still a gym teacher at Lockport High School. His name is Pat Seidel. And Mr. Seidel, great guy, very nice guy, very soft-spoken, but very smart. And when Mr. Seidel ever said something to me, I knew he meant it. There was never a point where he said something to me and I would think to myself, well, what does that really mean? It was pretty cut and dry. He was going to tell you how it was. But whether it was in his teaching, whether it was in his coaching, there were no, there wasn't a huge personality disparity in Pat Seidel as a coach or as a teacher. He was the same guy. He was always the same guy. The way he taught was the way he coached, and the way he coached was the way he taught. And I guess, you can maybe say, well, Yeah, that makes sense. Isn't that how it's supposed to be? No, that doesn't apply to every single teacher that is a coach. That doesn't apply to every coach that is a teacher. There's teachers that I had that were coaches that were awful coaches, but great teachers. There were coaches that I had that were great coaches, but awful teachers. Pat Seidel is a great teacher. Pat Seidel is a great coach. And those things are very rare in today's day and age. I feel like those facets of coaching and teaching are lost. And a part of that is why I do host this podcast. That is a huge motivating factor for me as to why I do host this podcast, because I want to somehow educate people on the experiences that I had as an athlete that weren't so great, and educate these people on how their kids should be taught or their kids should be coached. And I can honestly tell you that of the experiences that I had with teachers and experiences that I had with coaches, Pat Seidel was someone that I could count on. Pat Seidel was somebody that I could, lean on and say, hey, this guy's a great guy. And to my knowledge, Pat Seidel is still coaching at Lockport High School, still helping out at Lockport High School, and still teaching at Lockport High School. I haven't talked, I haven't visited with Pat Seidel in about 10 years since I graduated high school. And I got to tell you, that really bothers me. That really bothers me because I feel like that's my fault. I know that's my fault. I know that I should go to the high school and say to this guy, thank you for really inspiring me in a lot of different ways without even pointing somebody in the right direction or saying to somebody, hey, you should do this or hey, you should do that. I was a obnoxious, immature, flamboyant class clown. That's what I was in high school. I didn't care about my grades. I didn't care about what my teachers expected of me. I only cared about what my teammates thought of me if I was trying out for a sport at the time, or what my friends thought of me, or if, my grades were good enough, my parents were happy enough with it. I didn't really care what anyone else thought. Until I tried out for wrestling. And Pat Seidel was the wrestling coach for Lockport High School for a number of years. And when I tried out for the wrestling team, Pat Seidel was no longer the coach. He was like an assistant coach. And I'd coach Scapoletti and I'd coach Sean Murray. Those were the coaches, varsity and JV. And I didn't really enjoy that experience because I didn't really feel like Coach Scapoletti wanted to put a lot of time and effort into me as a senior wrestler, competing in his first season in high school. I feel like Sean Murray, the same thing. So much so that at one point, during one of the most, prolific moments of my scholastic sports career, I guess you could say, I dropped down from 135 pounds, which was my weight class in high school, believe it or not, was my weight class. 135 pounds. I dropped down to that. I dropped down to 123. And I did that because it was Christmas time. I could lose the weight real fast and get it back real fast. And I wanted to compete in a lower weight class. I thought my chances were really good. I thought I had a real solid opportunity to place in this tournament. And me and my dad, we drive out to Niagara Falls High School. And we get there, we walk in, we see the brackets on the wall, on the spongy gym wall. You know what I'm talking about, the padded wall in the gym. And we're looking, and we see 135, we see 130, we see 128, we see 125, we see 123. There was a 3-pound weight allowance, so I guess I could have competed anywhere between 123 and 128 pounds, or anywhere between 123 to 130 pounds. My coach, Sean Murray, JV, my other coach, Coach Scapoletti of varsity, they put me in the wrong bracket. Actually, they didn't put me in any bracket. They put me right in the bracket where I would have been had I not told them that I was going to cut weight. They left me in the same exact bracket that I would have been in had I not even lost a pound or tried to lose a pound or tried to put on a sweatsuit and lose, 7 pounds in a span of 2-3 days, which is really unhealthy, in case you didn't know. And I was devastated. Honest, I was devastated. I was furious. I was very embarrassed because my dad was the one that discovered it. And my dad said, "You're in the wrong weight class. You're in the same weight class." I said, "No." We bring the bracket, a copy of it to Coach Scapoletti, and he says, or my dad says something to him to the tune of, "Hey, we're still in the same weight class. We're dropping down, remember?" He said, "Oh yeah, we put you in the wrong bracket. Oh, the bracket's already made. There's nothing we can do." And I said, "There's nothing you can do. We gotta fix this. This isn't right." He said, "No, there's nothing we can do." And I competed at 127 at most, 128, 129 at most, versus guys that were 145 pounds. So not only did I compete in that situation, but I've won 2 matches in that scenario. And I ended up losing. I got pinned by a kid from Warsaw or something stupid. No, I didn't get pinned, actually. I lost a decision, which was on points. And it was like 15-11, something weird. And I remember Pat Seidel, who was an assistant coach, still worked within the program, very accomplished wrestler in his own right, collegiately, and competed in a lot of tournaments throughout the country. He didn't have to acknowledge it to me. He could have just left it alone and not drudged anything up in his position. He was actually, I would not have been shocked in his position within the coaching ranks within the program if he did that, because he was an assistant. He would step in the practices and drill with certain wrestlers and teach us certain techniques or craft certain techniques in certain ways, and tell us how to finish a double leg here, or finish single leg here, or when to shoot for this in this situation, or when to tie up in this situation. Very cerebral, very methodical, very smart. And it was instruction that I really took to, because that's how I learn. I like to see things from a well thought out process rather than just an athletic process. Maybe I wasn't the most athletic wrestler. Maybe I wasn't the most, maybe I should say, maybe I wasn't the most athletic. Maybe I wasn't the strongest, the fastest, but I wanted to be the smartest I could possibly be in that scenario of competing in my first ever high school wrestling season my senior year. And Pat Seidel did that for me. And I touched on it a little bit. I did not care about school. I only decided to care about school when I knew my high school, was about to end. I was a senior. So I said, hey, I want to get involved in something before I walk out of here. I want to have something to hang my hat on rather than, a couple years of kind of screwing around and not focusing on my studies as much as I should have been, barely skating by my classes. And I want to leave this high school and have something to speak of, have something to look back on. So I went out for the wrestling team and competed in, X amount of matches and did the best I could. I believe I won more matches than I lost. I know that. And did the best I could, tried the best I could, but also remembered who was there for me, who really tried to help me out, who put themselves out there. My dad put himself out there big time. We had a real bonding experience over the sport, and we still talk about it almost every day to this day. But Pat Seidel, somebody that I didn't expect to give me the time of day, because the coaches that I had that were the actual coaches listed as the coaches within the program, they didn't give me the time of day. So if the head coach wasn't going to give me the time of day, if the assistant / JV head coach were not going to give me the time of day, how was a coach that was somewhat retired, how was he going to give me the time of day? Well, he did. He showed me a lot of different drills, practiced with me literally one-on-one, and talked to me as if I was a respectful young man when at the time I was a 17-year-old kid. And I want to thank him for that. I feel like I need to thank him for that, because that experience really taught me a lot about who I was and who I needed to be or who I could be. And I think that should be the goal for every teacher, for every coach, is to shine a light on who a young kid could be, should be, can be, and shine a light on who they want to be. And Pat Seidel did that. And people need to know that. There are very few exceptions to the rule of coaching and teaching, as I said, of a great coach and a great teacher. Pat Seidel was both of those, is both of those. And I have to do my best job to find a way to see this guy, to meet this guy again, see this guy again, and let him know that. I don't know how the whole, Lockport Sports Hall of Fame works out. I don't know how this all breaks down. I don't know the structure of it. And I say that only to say, with all due respect to Pat Seidel, to Mr. Seidel, I don't know if he's already in the Lockport Sports Hall of Fame. If he isn't, he damn well should be. If there's any teacher that gave back to students as far as molding them as students and molding them as athletes, it's Pat Seidel at Lockport High School. He deserves that opportunity. He deserves to be given his moment, his shine, his day. And I don't think there's many people that would disagree with that. And if there are, that I don't know who they are. I honestly, I don't. The coolest part about it was Pat Seidel was my dad's wrestling coach. And back in the 80s, and when I would say that, he'd be like, man, you're making me sound so old. My dad would say that. He would say that. But he would always tell me, man, your dad was a good wrestler. Man, your dad really, he was a great wrestler. And I loved it. But I also hated it because on one hand, he'd tell me how great of a wrestler my dad was, and it made me feel like, oh, that's cool. It made me feel kind of like I was about to be a little badass myself. But then when I realized I wasn't nearly as good as the wrestler my dad was, and I needed a lot of work to get to where my dad was, it didn't just come naturally to me like it did for my dad. Mr. Seidel was the first guy to try to help me get to that point. To try to help me get to that point. And that's all I needed, was someone to help me try to get to that point. And I think that there's stories like this that student athletes forget. They forget who was there for them when they were athletes. They forget those moments because they were in high school, and you grow older and you get older and you form your own life, and you do certain things. You set out to accomplish certain things, different things, whether it's a work life or a personal life. You get married, you have kids, whatever it may be. You might move away, move into a completely different state, different city, and you forget those things. But I can honestly say I don't think I could ever forget. I don't think I could ever forget anything like that. Because that experience as a young 17, 18-year-old kid getting out of high school, that really shaped me. That really shaped me into who I am today. How many people can say that? How many people can say that an experience that was bad helped them be better? Maybe an experience that I didn't even do any wrong within that experience. I was the one trying to participate in a sport that I never participated in before, knowing that it was a sport I could easily get hurt in, knowing it was a sport that I could easily get embarrassed in. I had more to lose than anyone on that team due to the fact that I joined it as late as I did and could easily get hurt, could easily get embarrassed. But I knew that I had the support of my dad. I wanted to prove something to him, prove to him that I wasn't going to quit, prove to him that I was decent at it, that I could hold my own. And also, in the midst of that, I found a really great friend, a really great man that I think deserves a whole lot of attention for what he's done for these kids the last 40 years. And, I think the one thing I take away from this podcast is that I deserve to make this a real big moment and go back to Lockport High School, go back to where it all really started, and go back to meeting and seeing a guy that I think deserves a lot of credit for the success that I've had and the success of a lot of other students. Because I know I'm not the only student that he had that achieved something great. Because that's just the type of person he is that rubs off on everybody. He made us the best version of ourselves. To Pat Seidel, to Coach Seidel, I want to thank you for everything that you did for me in that short time as a wrestler at Lockport High School. You got my vote. You're a Hall of Famer in my book for what it's worth. I want to just tell you, thank you, really. And to do it in a podcast format, I think is really cool because there are a lot of people that listen to this show that aren't from Western New York or aren't from Buffalo or whatever. And now they'll know, what figure was it that kind of made me start to say, hey, there are players out there that are having bad experiences with their coaches? There are coaches out there that aren't getting the credit that they deserve. What can I do about this? Well, I could study the game, study the structure of coaching and front offices and everything like that. Go to school, make something of myself, and then we'll talk about it. I will publicly talk about it. And that's what I did, and that's what I've done. Without that experience, I wouldn't have done that. Without that experience, I might not even be talking on the air right now. I couldn't tell you. But it's something that I would definitely lean towards, saying that without that experience, I probably would not even be on the mic right now. Wow. There are teachers out there that can make a difference. There are coaches out there that can make a difference. It's up to the teacher, it's up to the coach, who in some cases may be one in the same person. It is up to that person to flip that switch. It is up to that person to turn that switch on and say, I'm going to help this kid. I'm going to make a difference in his or in her life. And I think that's so important. For somebody that was a student that didn't really care, I cared about that. And I noticed that when I saw a coach that was a teacher care, it changed everything. I'm Ryan Thomas. That was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. A coach can mean everything to a player, and a teacher and a coach can be one and the same.